from scratch. You must first invent the universe.
All right, hello to you. This is Sasha.
Hi, Sasha.
Nice to see you today.
Nice to see you. Thanks for being here and being part of this big adventure show that I got going on.
It is our pleasure. How may we serve you today?
I have several questions, and now I've heard different stories on the Zeta race, and I'm sort of wondering, it's probably, I already know the answer, but I'd love to get your perspective on it, is I've heard in one scenario that the Zetas have died off, that they, they created the hybrid races, they couldn't continue to reproduce, so they eventually died off. And I've heard other stories now that the Zetas are continuing their evolution because of their interaction with humans. They've actually activated their emotional bodies and are thriving quite well. And I don't know if they're back to reproducing, but at least they're on that path. Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming there's two different timelines that these are happening. How does this work?
Well, as with any species, if there is an aspect of the species that refuses to change, that portion of it will die off.
Okay.
All right. But as we were talking about before regarding the three eras of most of the physical species that you're connected with, the Zetas also have their three eras. So the first era was the era of their species crisis. And when they weren't able to reproduce and the emotional body was cut off, etc. The second era started to take place as the interactions with humans began. And all through the interaction period, for their species, it meant the reintegration with the emotional body through the work with humans, mm-hmm. but also through the creation of the hybrid species, because, and you know the whole story, the drama about learning to nurture them and things such as that.
Correct, yes.
And all of those challenges they had in the second era helped their integration process. Mm-hmm. Then the third era Zeta, we would call the awakened ones. Mm-hmm. So this is a very, very high level Zeta consciousness that, in talking about parallel timelines, mm-hmm. in the 80s and the 90s, very few people on Earth were tapping into that third level Zeta consciousness because people were still processing the more polarized victim consciousness.
Correct.
But we would say really beginning 5 to 10 years ago on Earth, many of you are now starting to tap into the third era Zeta consciousness when they have awakened. So their emotional bodies, mental bodies, all of that came into alignment and integration. And they've become like an elder race that is very, acting very much as mentors for younger species now.
Wow. And we have other races like the Sasani and the Yael, who are offshoots of our race with their race. How does that all how does that all work, I guess? To put it in a linear, and again, this is our linear minds trying to figure this out, because we have very advanced future versions of the Sasani Bashar coming in and talking to us, the Yael, we have other channelers bringing in different beings from the Yael civilization, but yet they're, again, us from the future. Can you explain that synergy in the Zeta? I'm assuming that they look up to their Zeta, that third tier of the Zetas that we were just talking about.
Yes.
That they're interacting with them on that level.
Yes.
Probably
Like grandfathers.
Right, grandfathers, because I'm sure their vibrational frequency is at that higher level. So in their reality, in their timeline, they still exist.
Yes.
They didn't die off.
Yes.
And yet we're humans in this level, and how does that interaction? I don't know. Could you go into depth a little bit about that?
My goodness, we're not sure exactly, because there's so many tangents we could go off at. Is there a specific curiosity? And we can start there.
It has to do with time, in the sense that we have these different aspects of the Yael and the Sasani and even the Zetas coming back at this particular time. That version of them, why not? And even the version of yourself, why not an earlier version of the Palladian?
All right.
And then we have higher density dimensional collectives of the Palladians also visiting us.
Yes. Well, it's back to what we were talking about earlier regarding frequency compatibility.
Okay.
And also what you're calling in to push you to move to another level.
Okay. I
So
see.
you have one aspect that is the challenge aspect that pushes you, and you have another aspect that is more of a mentorship level.
I see.
Okay, so for instance, you, on your world, you have some UFO lore, if you wish to call it that, from the 60s or the 70s, the Billy Meyer Pleiadian contacts, all right? And so sometimes people ask, Sasha, do you know Semyasi?
Okay.
Well, from my perspective, my time, she is a past figure.
Okay.
Long gone,
Right.
not in physical body anymore. But in your time stream in the 70s, you were pulling in those Pleiadian contacts because that's what you needed.
I see.
Now you're pulling in different types of Pleiadian contacts because that's what you need as well. So the Essassani especially, and the hybrid species, are playing a very important role that has to do with alchemy. What do we mean by that? Well, the idea of alchemy is the bringing together of two seemingly conflicting ideas that create a response when they come together to create a third idea.
Right.
And this is, let's say, energy dynamics 101 in terms of species evolution. So whenever you get to a planet that is moving from third to fourth density, they are going to have to integrate the mental and emotional bodies, and they do so through a form of alchemy. So the Essassani, in a sense, are the alchemists, or the representations of successful alchemy.
Okay.
And you see it through the combination of Zeta and human, but also through what they actually integrated, which is the mental and emotional bodies.
And I've heard Bashar speak that the Sasani are closely related to the Sirius energy.
Yes.
And would the Yael be closer related to the Palladian energy? Or are they all sort of, everything's related to the Sirius
Well,
energy?
you know, it's one big incestual family, okay? But in terms of Bashar, you will find that the flow of energy for the Essassani evolution moves toward a higher non-physical Sirian vibration for its future selves. So you find that there's a lot of future incarnations that move from the Essassani to the Sirian.
Okay.
And we would call that third era Sirian beings, again, the awakened ones.
I see. And humanity, it seems like we're in a crossroads right now because we have so many directions we can go with our evolution.
Yes.
And then this is, again, going back to that timeline analogy that I saw in the sky with every star, with which direction do we go? Do we go, and obviously there's timelines where we go in all of it. And I guess that's where again, sort of going back full circle, this is why I saw that analogy. We can go towards the Syrian direction of evolution. We can go towards the Palladian direction. We can even go towards the Draconian way of evolution. And in specific timelines, we are doing it all
Exactly,
simultaneously.
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And it's really up to us individually to see which one we want to be a part of.
So we go back then to what we were talking about a few moments ago, about because the ego cannot control the trajectory, all you have is the current moment. So in the current moment, your trajectory becomes clear. So this is some work Lyssa and Jermaine and myself have been doing with those, with using the Galactic cards to help bring the focus with people to what is happening for them in this moment now. And let's say it's an emotional pattern that's more anchored in past Pleiadian, or an emotional pattern that's more anchored in past Zeta. Then these become icons almost, or archetypal stories that can help you move through in this moment now, whatever your challenge is, and it ripples through time in both directions. Because ultimately, again, going back to the 7 rooms, 7 concentric circles, you are the one and your fragments are inside the one. So you're never really outside of anything, and everything is you anyway.
And at the point of evolution where you're at now with your society, is there as many options and choices available to you as we have here on humanity?
What kind of options and choices?
I feel like, again, looking in our sky, we have, we have the Draconian way of doing things. We have the Palladian way of doing things, the Syrian way of doing things, the Sasani, the Yael, all of these different ways, and you sort of answered the question, and I'm going to sort of reword it from my own interpretation. Is basically we just, again, follow our highest excitement.
Yes.
And that will bring us on that path.
Exactly.
Individually, without us even thinking about it.
Exactly, because when you're looking at consciousness as it is expressed in 3rd density or even early 4th density, you can still see the idea of separate paths, the Draconian way or the Pleiadian way or the Syrian way.
Right.
But actually, as you move farther and farther into 4th density, the paths become a much wider road that contains them all, and that's when you start to see the path has always been the same. It just was shaped and smelled differently, so to speak, but it's always been the same path. So
in your guys' evolution state right now, you sort of just have maybe more awoken to that idea that the path is the same, therefore
it doesn't matter.
In our perception, it may look like we have all these choices.
Exactly.
But in reality, we're just going to end up going the one that we're going to feel excited about.
Exactly. And of course, my reality structure is very different. So when children are born in my world, we know right away what their path is, what their highest excitement is, as you've said. And that is nurtured. And the child is taught from a very young age to express that. And this is one of the reasons why in the contact work we do, we often bring children for the contact work with humans, because those in our society who will be the future ambassadors of contact on many worlds display those talents and those joys very early on.
So you're not forcing everybody to be a doctor and a lawyer.
No, exactly, exactly.
And I feel like we're moving out of that.
You are moving out of that. We know it doesn't look that way, but
right.
You are.
Yeah, there's, I get it. Fascinating. When it comes to working with all these different energies, and in past channelings you've talked about the association of worlds.
Yes.
And is your society part of this association?
Yes.
And
it's not like Star Trek.
It's not quite like Star Trek, though.
But
right.
Star Trek is a wonderful metaphor for you to understand it.
I get it. And in the association, you've sort of moved out of battling in wars, and you can't really be part of the association if you have that sort of dominating enslavement idea?
Yes. However, forgive us for being picky, but we're going to just be picky about the words. It's not a matter of you can't be in our club, so to speak. Literally, those who are still in third density, still experiencing battles and conflicts, simply don't resonate with the idea that we are.
Okay.
So.
And would this be the same with higher density draconian densities that are sort of, again, battling out the Orion War idea? Are they... Did the Association of Worlds, did it exist during the Orion Wars?
It was in a different form.
Okay.
Because the Orion Wars were really so very long ago.
Right.
And because of that, the only elder species were few and far between.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But it was, they did have a version of it, but even then, it was the very clear idea that you cannot interfere. Because all third density species have to go through their process. And
so was the Orion Wars primarily a third density event?
It was a third density event, and it also carried over into the beginning phases of fourth density as well.
I see.
Until it became impossible to maintain the separation any longer.
I see. Yeah, and again, so going back to the densities, the idea of higher density versions of different races, and I keep bringing up the Draconians because I feel there's a lot of resonance with that archetypal energy right now on planet Earth, because we have such a mixed bag of that, and the reptilian energy DNA is in us, if I'm correct. And we are working through that karma, so to say. Karma in the term that we're familiar with. So, at these higher density versions of draconian energy, do they still hold those same archetypes that we're familiar with in third density?
No.
Okay.
No. You're going to find that the idea of battling,
yes,
it wears itself out in the early phases of fourth density.
Okay.
So when you're talking about higher level draconian consciousness, it has gone more into deep unconditional love.
Okay. So if you go to a 6th, 7th density draconian being, vast differences between the third density version.
Yes, vast differences.
Okay. Probably we can't even conceptualize what those
exactly.
What that is. But it's a very unique evolutionary path, very separate from the Palladian perspective.
Yes, exactly.
I see. I've gotten this download. I had a visitation from a mantis being, and this goes into the download that I got. I'm still trying to digest, and maybe you can help me with this. Is that the draconian energy was sort of wanting to experience itself, wanted to evolve past 6th or 7th density, that the draconians, that energy archetype, sort of had a hard time going past that density, that version of existence, because of its grasping onto a physical form. Is that
again? Yeah. We cannot say anything is wrong or right.
Sure.
All right, it's just a matter of interpretation.
Right.
To us, because the fourth density is the last in the way we
okay.
measure,
That's right.
there is, once you move into fifth, sixth, or seventh, there no longer is physical bodies.
Okay.
Now, there have been many species who tried very hard to cling to physicality and not move into the non-physical expression in fifth density.
Maybe that.
It could be
That's that version. I
Yes.
guess the main thing I got, and I sort of assumed because of my understanding of densities, but the main thing I got was the draconian energy, because of its resistance to go into non-physical reality, but there was still a portion of that energy that wanted to move into that
Yes.
energy. Therefore, it called upon the mantis beings to help help design a plan, and that's sort of what humanity is a plan to help move that consciousness into a non-physical reality, evolution. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Well, you brought something up that is very key here.
Okay.
And you're calling them mantis beings.
Sure.
We call them founders.
Founders.
Same idea.
Okay.
And if we can, we'll just give you our definition of them from the bigger picture. So when the one consciousness began its fragmentation, that eventually became the souls that have the individual lives, one of the first fragments from the source was a collective beings that we call founders, that are kind of the architects. And when humans feel or perceive their energy, they see them as mantis or insectoid. That's one of the ways they appear.
Right.
Another way they appear are the very tall, willowy beings that
Was this Barbara Lamb's?
yes, the spring onion
spring
beings.
onion
Yes,
beings.
it was
So these are
founder beings.
founder beings. Perfect.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense now.
Yes, and so these beings, known as the architects, are overseeing, so to speak, the building of the structure of the physical stage play, let's say. And so whenever a civilization or a species gets in trouble, so to speak, we have a tendency to call them for guidance.
Okay.
The Orions did, the Pleiades did, the Sirians did, the Zetas did, the Dracos did.
Right. Okay. Yeah, the Zetas. I got that too. That did the Zetas even have the technology to travel interdimensionally to our timeline? I got that the Mantis helped out with that a little bit.
Yes. Zetas, though, they're quite unique, as you well know. And because they were able to harness such intense energy of mentality, they could do things in terms of the traveling through timelines that no other species could do.
Oh, really?
So that's
Okay.
one of the reasons why too
Fascinating.
they could do that.
And these mantis beings, often in abduction scenarios, temporary detainment scenarios, show up sort of in the
Yes,
background.
Exactly.
And so I'm assuming this is probably why, and seen with many different races too. The Palladian,
Yes.
there's a
That's why.
mantis being with the Palladians.
That is why. They are like overseers,
Fascinating.
and not in a controlling way, of course.
And are they in a specific density, or they sort of can manifest in any density depending on who's in trouble?
We'd say primarily seventh density, because
Okay.
even though they're manifesting seemingly as a being, it's really a collective. So they cannot manifest physically, which is one of the reasons why, in a sense, now we're using this figuratively, they could channel through more physical beings. So if you have Zetas accompanied by a mantis, it's not that the mantis is physically there, but the human is perceiving the energy
Right.
and can interpret it.
Right. Yeah. That my sort of download was not a physical interaction. It was more of a data drop. 'Cause
Exactly.
That's the way it felt.
Exactly.
It's very, very unique, and I've to date it's been my really only conscious interaction with an extraterrestrial presence in that sense.
Well, how many days do you have in Sedona coming up? Yes.
Okay, I've got
We'll
a few
see
days.
about that.
All right, very cool. So staying on the density level, density topic, it's a big one for me. There's a lot of talk about inner Earth beings, especially recently. It's sort of been in the consciousness. There's been a whistleblower who's been talking about interaction with inner Earth beings, and we're finding out this new history that these beings have been there for millions of years, predating humanity and sort of staying low key. Now, are those beings fourth density beings, fourth density beings, or
Mostly fourth density beings.
okay?
There are some that are fifth density, so they're not necessarily perceived as solid objects, so to
I
speak,
see.
but as light energy. And they're much like what we said about the Anunnaki. They're really a collective of races.
Okay. So yeah, so there's many different races
Yes.
in the inner Earth.
Yes.
And because there are different densities, different frequencies, if, for example, are we only now able to perceive them because we're shifting into this fourth
Yes.
density?
Yes.
And if we were to try, let's say in our past timelines of third density, even 100 years ago, if we were to try to burrow into the Earth and try to find these beings, we would just hit rocks, per se?
You would not really have the contact, except in the cases of those spontaneous moments of openness, where you're actually not digging, so to
Right.
speak, but you're open to the contact.
So when Admiral Byrd flew over the North Pole and saw the big hole, and you know, then we have all these lures and stories of Journey to the Center of the Earth. You know,
Yes.
these sorts of stories.
Yes.
So that was just because the heart space was in the right space to go into that.
And the timing and
Right.
many things, nexus point
Okay.
of timelines, many things, but not necessarily repeatable.
Okay.
Once the ego gets involved, yes.
Right. Do you guys interact with those fourth density beings?
Yes, there are certain ones that we do because, you know, humans, this is not aimed at you, of course, but humans have a tendency of thinking they are the only things walking the earth, yes?
Right.
But the earth is quite populated on many levels of other dimensions. And in the ancient times, because there were so many beings on the planet, and during the times when those groups left, many stayed behind and began to build their own colonies. So you have especially one very populated colony is what we would call Syrians, ancient Syrians that stayed and experienced their ascension process here
Oh, wow.
on your planet.
Wow.
And very often they're seen as blue.
Okay. And on a specific density reality, they're there, and
Yes.
do they coexist with us?
Yes,
They do.
yes. And when you are in the space in your consciousness to connect with them, you most certainly can. We've
Okay.
spoke to many who have.
Okay. And do you work with them?
Sometimes,
do you guys
yes.
work with them?
Yes.
Okay.
Especially when we're doing contact work in areas where they are active, and they actually tend to be active in seismically active places,
Oh, okay.
volcanic areas.
So their origins is Sirius, but then they migrated to Earth at some point in our history?
Their ancestors
Their
came
ancestors.
here when the Syrians were here, and some of them stayed. Some of them also, now of course, in the cosmology that we've presented, the Syrian beings, the Orion beings, the Zeta beings, they all come from Vega lineage.
Okay.
So the very, very ancient Vegas who colonized Mars, also some stayed behind, came to Earth as well. So that's why we say there's a mix.
I see. So is Vega sort of our elders
Yes.
in that sense?
Yes. What is most known in your galactic family is what we call Vegan mysticism, which is a school of spirituality that was birthed in Vega millions and millions and millions of years ago, that passed to the different civilizations in your galactic family and also seeded on Earth. So the seeds of it on Earth, most specifically you see within some of the ancient Sanskrit and Hindu times.
Oh, okay.
And various seeds around the world. So it's quite prolific, vegan mysticism.
Mm. And going back to the Syrians, were they around during the time of Atlantis? The ones that stayed here on Earth?
Yes, yes they were.
And sort of when was Atlantis, I assume it was a mixed density bag of tricks.
Mixed density bag and mixed density, and mixed,
race.
A mixed drama going on.
Okay.
Lots of things going on.
Lots of things going on. And all of us, most of us, I guess, humans have had experiences from or simultaneous lifetimes there.
Yes.
That we're working through that karma now.
Yes.
And so the Syrians were there, and then that sort of event happened, cataclysms, things like this.
All sorts of things.
And if it happened in third density reality, did it also happen in these other? If there's mixed densities interacting with each other, did it happen across the density board? The cataclysms, the disruptions.
We see what you're asking. Well, when we say mixed densities, we have to define that.
Okay.
Right now on Earth, you have mixed densities, even though it's not.
Yeah, no,
we don't
we
see
do.
it.
We have the low end of the third and the high end of the
Exactly.
third and low end of the fourth.
Exactly, yeah. you have fifth density versions of
Right.
yourselves and sixth, because again, it's the concentric, it's the boxes, the
Right.
concentric nesting boxes. So in the Atlantean time, physically speaking, you did have a mix of third and fourth density beings, in a sense populating the same space-time, but you also had the other non-physical influences as well. So, and lots of different dramas, because everyone was playing out whatever it was they needed to play out for their own evolution. So it was one of those nexus points of evolution that were very important to, let's say, show you the trajectory for the next phase of your evolution. Because you could have, as a species, shifted at that time.